writers, you're listening to the Kobo ReWriting Life podcast, where we highlight an episode from our backlist that will bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm your host, Tara Kremen, Director of Kobo Writing Life. Today's episode is a throwback to 2016 and was recorded live in the Kobo headquarters in Toronto. It's an interview with author Robert Harris and journalist Johanna Schneller talking about Robert's book Conclave. I picked this episode because it's Oscar season, and when I saw the trailer to Conclave, I thought, this sounds so familiar, and I remembered sitting in the audience at Kobo when Robert talked all about the writing of this book. I wanted to resurface this interview, especially as the movie has just been nominated for Best Picture. If you haven't seen it or read the book, you should. Also, just a little time travel warning that being 2016, this interview discusses Brexit, so just a heads up on that. I hope you enjoy.
Hi everybody, welcome to this special edition of Kobo and Conversation. I say special because we have Robert Harris today as our guest, and I'd like to welcome Robert to Kobo, as well as the Penguin Random House CEO Brett and Kristen Pop. You've made so many promotions. I call you
President and Publisher.
President and Publisher. It is a great pleasure to welcome Robert Harris to the stage. We were just during lunch we were talking about my own background with Robert, and let me quickly tell you, he is a fantastic writer, and in particular for anyone with any knowledge of the Catholic background, Conclave is the book you need to read. And if you know anything about Robert Harris, you know the Vatican and the Catholic Church is quintessential Robert Harris terrain to write about. Because no one else combines historical narrative with the kind of timeless mechanism of power and corruption, politics. And indeed, if you think of his work, I call it the Robert Harris effect. You can never look at politics and not think of Robert Harris. You see what happens in the Brazilian president who gets impeached, or the American elections, or a young, hot prime minister in Canada who is orating like a true Cicero. Or you look at the Brexit and I can't help thinking, is this a Robert Harris narrative or is it actually reality? It's funny how art imitates reality and the other way around. It is fantastic to welcome him here. You know his work probably: Fatherland, Enigma, Pompeii, the Cicero trilogy, Officer and Spy, many great works and very impressive body of work. I had the very great pleasure of being his publisher in the Netherlands for a couple of years, and I got to know Robert a little bit, and I've come to think of him in three archetypes: the monk, the journalist, and the gentleman. The monk because of his incredible dedication and work ethic, his really, really incredible research. The journalist because of his very sharp intellect and very sharp investigative journalism, and of course he is a charming Englishman who's extremely articulate. Those three together makes for a fantastic best-selling author that we're very proud to welcome to Kobo today. He's going to be interviewed by Johanna Schneller, our American-Canadian cultural reviewer and broadcaster, and I can't wait to hear the stories. One question I'd like to put in, that is, Robert, what do you think of Brexit?
Hi everybody, thanks for coming out. So let's ask the boss's question first. What do you think of Brexit?
Am I allowed to swear? I think it's a bad day for Britain and for Europe and for the world in a way. But I think you can't see it in isolation. It's clearly part of a phenomenon. Technology, if I can say that in this place, has outstripped human capacity to control it. People are being left behind. They resent it. And Brexit may be the least of our worries if trends continue in the United States as they've gone over the last few days. I think it's all part of the same phenomenon. For the first time in my adult life, I've got slightly more alarmed about public events, and it has a kind of almost a 1930s vibe about it now, and we've thought we could all take a holiday from politics and not really worry about it. And the best people in our society, I think, more or less didn't go into politics. That may be about to change.
That people will be inspired.
I think people will feel they'll have to get more involved, because at the moment all the noises that I'm really hearing are coming from some... I'm voicing understandable concerns, but there's a lot of demagoguery out there. It doesn't seem to me that the centre, liberal, left, whatever you want to call it, is very successful in countering at the moment.
Is there a book in this for you? What is something you have to have in it for it to be a book for you?
This is too immediate. It'll be 10 or 20 years before you can really make a judgment about this in any sense that would make it worthwhile. That wouldn't be other than a piece of journalism. That's why I always set my novels, or mostly set them, in the past, because you can see what's happened, and you can see there the pattern that your own society that is reflected in the past. And all my novels are contemporary. In particular, the Cicero books are really all about strains on democratic structures and the kind of people who pursue power and what happens to them. So I see those as contemporary books. But I wouldn't. If I tried to write a novel now about Brexit, the real story of Brexit, we won't really know for 5 years, if that.
Right. This book very much feels like a piece of journalism. I'd love to know how you did it. How were you able to get into the Vatican? Who did you speak to?
Well, I had long harboured the idea of writing something about a conclave for lots of reasons. It's the oldest election in the world. It's the most secretive, the most dramatic in a way, with the plumes of smoke. These extraordinary men, 120 men in costume in the Sistine Chapel. How on earth did it work? I mean, I was simply curious as much as anything else. And after I finished the last Cicero book, I promised myself I'd see if I could make this work, because I like almost the Agatha Christie country house enclosed environment where all these people gather. And I came across quite early a secret diary that had been kept by a cardinal in contravention of all the rules of the 2005 Conclave. And it described the kind of different ballots that had happened, and how the Sistine Chapel was one half of it, the sacred half of the election, but then there was a profane half in the Casa Santa Marta where all the cardinals stayed and gossiped and intrigued. And then I thought that I could write a novel about this. So I wrote to the Vatican and said, I knew that there was no point in saying to the Vatican, tell me all the secrets of a conclave.
Here's my 10 million questions.
One thing you do learn as a journalist is to ask realistic questions. So all I did was ask permission to see the places that aren't open to the public. And I told them what I was doing, quite frankly. And to my surprise, I got an email back quite quickly from a Monsignor, the Pope's Master of Ceremonies. If you see the Pope and there's a guy adjusting a long microphone, he's the guy adjusting the long microphone. And he said, come on Monday morning, whatever it was. So I turned up, and all the things I wanted to see, they showed me. The Casa Santa Marta, which was specially built in the past. The cardinals who have to be withdrawn from the world during a conclave used to sleep on camp beds set up in the great halls of the Apostolic Palace. But it was pretty grim, with a lot of 80-year-olds, needing the loo in the night, and just all being issued with chamber pots and so on. So, if it was in midsummer that the Pope died, no air conditioning in Rome. It was no joke. So anyway, a custom-built place was built within the walls of the Vatican, the Casa Santa Marta, in 1996, and that's where the cardinals all go. And when they arrive, their phones are taken off them, their laptops, their luggage is scanned. They go to rooms that the shutters have been welded shut, so it's all in artificial light. It's like a bunker, really. And there they stay until such time as they've elected a pope. So I saw that. And then they're taken by minibuses through the Vatican Gardens, around the side of the Basilica of St. Peter's, through various secret courtyards and up a staircase, and they go on the first day to the Pauline Chapel, again closed to the public, which is the Pope's private chapel, which has 2 huge and astonishing frescoes by Michelangelo on either wall. And from there they walk to the Sistine Chapel, where they vote, and to the left of the altar is a room called the Room of Tears, which is where the newly elected Pope, when he's achieved a 2/3 majority, is taken. They have 3 papal outfits, small, medium and large, plus various sizes of red shoes, and he's robed, and then he's led out to the St. Peter's Square to speak to 100,000 or more people who've assembled. It is an extraordinary procedure, and lent itself really to a novel. I'm surprised actually no one's ever just done it before.
Yeah. What surprised you about the Vatican? I reading the book, I could not wrap my mind around the scale of the place. It's what stuck out for you? Was there anything that took you by surprise?
Yes, I was absolutely amazed. I mean, the whole idea of the conclave is to elevate the cardinals to a state of meditative, I wouldn't say bliss, but a sort of altered state of consciousness. And of course, they're greatly aided by the fact they're in the Sistine Chapel. So they stare at Michelangelo's Last Judgment, and they have the Sistine Chapel of the creation above their heads. And there's endless prayers and invocations of God, and it's impossible not to feel the power of the place and the wealth and the art treasures. And I didn't put this in the novel because at the time I wasn't sure quite the form the book would take. So when they said at the end of this tour, is there anything else you'd like to see? I said I'd quite like to see the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State is effectively the Prime Minister to the Pope's President, if you want to look at it in that way. So they said fine. So they took me up various staircases and long, extraordinary corridors until we came to a suite of offices where there were all sort of desks and computers, as you might expect, and now there were rather more priests than you'll see in Kobo's offices tapping away, and a passage linking these offices with photocopiers and a water cooler, and running along it for 15-20 yards an extraordinary Pompeian Romanesque fresco of trellis work, wooden trellis work, a garden, birds, animals, astonishing. And I said, "Who's this by?" "Raphael," was the reply. So I think at that moment that brought something home to me. Oh, nobody ever sees that. Yeah. In fact, a few months later I took 2 of our children to St. Petersburg, to the Winter Palace, where we had a very snooty guide showing us around, and they have a copy of it in St. Petersburg, and I said, I've seen the original of this. And the man practically fainted because nobody ever sees the original, and that is the only copy that was ever permitted of it. Yeah. So I was overwhelmed by the experience of the Vatican, absolutely.
Yeah. How much research did you do for this? I mean, it just seems like a mountainous amount. How many months? What did you do?
Well, I was talking earlier, I've got into a rhythm. I generally finish a book around the beginning of July, and it was around that time that I decided I'd try and do Conclave next. And so I started reading everything I could lay my hands on. It seems to me that it's been insufficiently acknowledged by writers, the enormous power that the internet has given to us. An earlier book I wrote about the Dreyfus affair, everyone thinks I spent years in France. I never left my desk at any point. Every single thing that I required for that book was online. All the newspapers, the Bibliothèque Nationale has all the newspapers, all the trial transcripts, all the books of the era, all the secret file on the Dreyfus Affair, everything was online. And you could even, with Google Earth, get down into the streets, which are unchanged, where everything took place. So it's hugely speeded up one's ability to write. And I've never actually seen this acknowledged by any authors. It has also, incidentally, given us all huge problems, because the old standbys of the sort of novel I write, gumshoe detective work, looking things up in libraries, hearing something behind you, being followed. Now you can all do it in the first 15 minutes. I mean, this affects all novelists.
The pizza guy heard me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you could open Pride and Prejudice. I mean, Mrs. Bennet would know all about Mr. Knightley and everyone who moved in up the road. She'd have them on Wikipedia in no time. The whole thing, the whole story would collapse. But anyway, it's a huge resource. So I had that. I read everything that was available, and I got all the books that I could read, and I had the trip to the Vatican, and I thought about the book quite hard, and even though I was doing publicity for my last novel, Dictator, I was still able to more or less work out what I wanted to do by Christmas. Then I started work on it this January, and I've got into a routine. I mean, one of the things I have to do is I'm published in quite a few languages. In particular, Germany is as big a market for me almost as the UK, so the book is translated as I write it, and I wrote it between January and the beginning of July.
Okay, I feel really, really, really bad right now.
I feel really, really nervous about the thought I've got to do it again next year.
How many hours a day are you writing then?
I start early in the morning, 7 or 8 o'clock, and sometimes when it's spring and getting lighter, even earlier than that, and I always finish by about 12:30. I think one can do about 4 hours or so real hard creative work, and then it's best to just leave it. So then I'll have lunch with a friend, or have a drink and take the dog out or whatever, and really think about other things. Stephen King has a very good phrase for the subconscious. He calls it the boys in the basement. And the boys in the basement work away when you're not actually at the desk. And it is quite amazing that if you can get into a trick of recreation, I mean, the clue is in the name, recreation, and sleep and then get up the next day, then I check through what I'd written the day before, and then go on. And if you can write 1,000 words a day, say, which is about 3 pages of a printed book, then you can write a book in, theoretically, 120 days.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, well, of course, it doesn't work like that, and you hit things go wrong and so on. But I was a journalist for many years, and I believe in deadlines. I believe that I certainly would be incapable of doing something, and I'd have to leave things to the last minute, and also I need the fear to make me produce something, and I believe in fear in this context, because I think adrenaline speeds up your reactions. It's almost like a natural drug, and you see things you wouldn't otherwise see if you've got to make these various deadlines. So I like to work like that, and I think about the great 19th century novelists Dickens and Trollope and Thackeray, and if it was good enough for them to work writing monthly instalments with the printer waiting, then that's good enough for me. I think if you've got years and you just don't really settle to it, you can produce a masterpiece. You might also just produce a load of junk that could have been written a lot quicker.
Do you believe in inspiration? Do you believe in waiting for the moment of genius to strike, or do you just think, I'm going to write 4 hours, and if I throw it all away, who cares?
Well, inspiration is just a posh word for ideas, really. And you just really need each day to have something happen, think of some fresh idea that that's a good idea, and you see something. So one just wants to get oneself in a state where you can have that going on. And of course, there's no guarantee that it will, and you can hit a brick wall. Right. But one of the advantages of getting a bit older and having now done 11 novels is that there's a body of work. You can say, well, I've done it before. I've been here before.
I probably won't have no more ideas.
Yeah. But of course the day will come when you probably won't be able to do it. So I'm trying to pack them in now quickly while I still can.
What does novel writing give you that journalism didn't? What's the
everything.
joy?
I never wanted to be a novelist. I like creative work, and I knew I was better at the longer run of a piece of writing than the short piece. But I never really wanted to be a novelist. In the 1980s, I wrote a book about the Hitler Diaries affair, which is still in print, called Selling Hitler, and it was about the forged Hitler diaries and the scandal and the characters, and it was quite close to fiction. It was a sort of tale, And as I was working on that, I read Hitler's Table Talk, which, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but Hitler was so convinced he was going to win that in 1941 and 1942 he would hold forth over his dinners at his military headquarters, and his words were considered so brilliant that a team of stenographers would sit in the corner while he was having dinner, taking down all his ideas, and he was laying out the vision of the world as it would be if he had won the war. And I found it riveting, and I thought I should do a non-fiction book about that because it was a revelation to me. And there were 4,000 or 5,000 civil servants in Berlin planning what the world would look like if Hitler had won. And there were maps and photographs and architectural drawings. And then I thought, well, why don't I do it? This is a clever idea. Rather than a straight non-fiction book, why don't I do it like a guidebook? So that, you land at the Adolf Hitler airport, and then you get on the car and you go here, there you see the giant dome, and so on. So I went down that route, and then I realised that this didn't really answer the questions which most interested me, which was, would ordinary Germans want to live in these giant, the empire in the Ukraine and so on, where there were supposed to be 25 million German citizens living by the 1960s. And above all, what would Hitler have? How would the regime have explained the disappearance of all the Jews? 6 million in Germany and Poland, 10 million if the whole of Europe had been conquered. And then, of course, I realised that there was nothing except fictional tools that one could use to analyse this. Mm-hmm. So I ended up creating a novel. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, for me as a writer, the tool of the imagination has been the thing that I can use to address the subjects that interest me. And that's how I became a novelist, but for no reason other than that.
The one good thing Hitler ever did.
That's very kind of...
Who has a question out here? Unfortunately, we're so pressed for time because this fellow's kind of busy. But, yes?
Hi. I just wanted to ask about your inspiration or idea, I guess, whether or not it had to be with the fact that we've had, 2 recently new popes. Was that kind of what sparked it? And then I have kind of a secondary question just about your knowledge of the Vatican, because it's so unorthodox for a pope to resign. Is the system exactly the same as it is if the pope dies?
Well, to take the second one first, the system is the same. And I don't know what the resignation of Benedict means, whether that's going to be because of modern medicine, the likelihood that a pope can be kept alive many years after he's ceased to really be capable of functioning in the job, whether that means there will be more resignations in the future, or whether a lot of people feel it set a bad precedent and you can't have lots of ex-popes hanging around, it just sort of destroys the mystique of the whole job, really. But in terms of what actually happens, it makes no difference. There's a procedure from the moment sede vacante, as the opening chapter of the novel is called, from the moment the throne is empty, then the whole procedures kick in, and they're very, very specific. And they provided a lot of the structure of the book, actually, because the Vatican lays out day by day what has to happen. So that's the second point. And the first point was...
I'm just wondering, because it has happened twice.
Yeah, whether
that's what sparked your idea.
I think it did, yes, because I witnessed those two conclaves, 2005, 2013, on the television, and saw... I mean, when the Pope is elected, he moves from the Sistine Chapel, newly robed, along the gallery. To the right is you would look down into the Basilica of St. Peter's. To the left, you look down into the St. Peter's Square, and he goes to the balcony, and the scenes we're all familiar with when he comes out and the lights playing and so on. And all the cardinals who've elected him are following him, and they all go to the windows to look, and you see them, as twice seen them on television, craning their heads. Lots of them packed into these windows. And they were the faces of these old men, and they are almost all over 60. Worldly, innocent, cunning, naive, pleased, sad. To see them all there, I remember thinking at both occasions, this is what the Roman Senate would have looked like when in Cicero's time. And I think it was that very much, made me think. This would be something interesting. They've allegedly just elected him, but something must have happened before. That was the thing that intrigued me.
Anybody else? Yes.
So you've mentioned a lot about technology affecting your writing and sort of technology in the church, going to put your laptop, your cell phone away, copiers, etc. So my question, I guess, is: I know you spent a lot of time looking back. But how do you think technology has affected the Catholic Church and system? How do you think it's going to continue to affect it going forward? Because now we can read about all of a sudden these secrets might not sort of stay secret forever. So I guess just what, in learning about the church and visiting, did you get any understanding of how technology is now involved in the Catholic Church and how it might be going forward?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, the technology has had the effect of centralising the power of the Church in Rome, because they can now send out edicts and issue instructions. And the general belief is that Rome, the Curia, as they call the permanent sort of government of the Church, is much stronger, and the system has become much more centralised than it was. And this is particularly used by Pope Benedict, who was a conservative enforcer of strict rules. So in the short term, the answer is that it's made it the centralised control has been greater. In the long term, I suspect the reverse will happen, and that it will become impossible to control the church. And that's one of the themes of this novel, because the growth in the church, which now has 1.25 billion members, is not in America, Canada, Europe. It's in Africa and in Asia, where the social mores, the cultural attitudes are totally different. In Africa, homosexuality is regarded as an abomination. Obviously, in Europe and in North America, there is now enormous pressure on the church to accept that these equally, this is God's creation as well. And the same, in my view, will happen no matter what Pope Francis has said. Not that I wish to challenge the Pope, but I don't think that the pressure in the Western world, as it were, against women ordination or the greater role of women in the church can be resisted. I think it's going to be very difficult. But I think that technology is going to play its part in all of this, and it will have the effect of throwing open the windows, I think.
One last question. I know you have to sign the poster and get out of here. Will you return to the Vatican? Will you, as a subject?
No, I don't think so. I feel that I've written what I wanted to write about it, and I emerged with more respect for the sort of people who are involved in the Catholic Church now than I had before I started. Actually,
wow. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's a brilliant book. I urge everybody who hasn't read it yet to read it. I kept saying to my husband, Conclave. I couldn't say the word conclave. That's Conclave. And that's the way it reads. It's really fantastic.
And may I just say thank you to all of you for all that you do for writers like me. I do appreciate it. It's a great pleasure to come out and see everybody who's involved in this great industry of distribution of books and writing and fiction and non-fiction. It's been great to see you all. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Rewriting Life podcast. If you're interested in Robert's books, we'll include links in our show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us at KoboWritingLife.com. Be sure to follow us on socials. We're at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook and Twitter, and kobo.writing.life on Instagram and Threads. This episode was hosted by Johanna Schneller with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music is composed by Tearjerker, and thanks to Robert for being a guest. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!